My boyfriend declared, "My ex is coming to my birthday party. Be cool, or it's over." I replied, "I'll be very cool." Then I greeted her at the door, smiled, and said, "He's all yours, girl. I was just leaving." His birthday party ended the moment I walked out. My boyfriend declared, "My ex is coming to my birthday party. Be cool, or it's over." And that was the exact moment I realized I was already being replaced. The music was too loud, the lights too warm, and his smile, tight, rehearsed, never reached his eyes. I stood in his kitchen holding a plastic cup that tasted like betrayal, watching him rehearse apologies he never planned to give. When I replied, "I'll be very cool," he nodded like he'd won something. An hour later, the doorbell rang. I saw her through the glass, confident, familiar, wearing the color he once told me he loved on me. His hand twitched before he reached for the door. That tiny movement said everything. So I stepped forward first, opened it wider, smiled calmly, and felt something inside me settle into clarity. The room leaned in. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't explain. I just chose myself and walked straight into the quiet that followed. I wasn't new to being the reasonable one. In our relationship, I was the buffer, the translator of moods, the person who smoothed sharp edges so things could keep moving. He called it being mature. I slowly learned. It meant swallowing discomfort so he wouldn't have to feel guilty. We'd been together long enough that people assumed I was permanent, long enough that my presence faded into background noise. I remembered birthdays, listened to stories I'd already heard, laughed at jokes that weren't funny the second time. He liked how calm I was. Calm made things easy. Calm didn't ask inconvenient questions. The ex was always a footnote until she wasn't. A name dropped casually. A comparison disguised as nostalgia. I noticed how his tone softened when he spoke about the past, how his eyes sharpened when I asked for clarity. Each time I told myself I was imagining things. I was good at that, editing my own instincts for the sake of peace. I'd spent years being underestimated by people who mistook silence for weakness and patience for permission. They thought I wouldn't leave because I never made scenes. They assumed calm meant compliant. They were wrong about one thing. Calm doesn't mean you stay. Sometimes it means you see everything clearly and decide exactly when to walk away. The days leading up to the party were quiet in the wrong way. Not peaceful, careful. He checked his phone face down now, paused before answering simple questions, said my name like it was a negotiation. When I asked what time people were coming, he said, "Don't stress about it," which really meant don't ask. He mentioned her once more casually while scrolling. "She might stop by early," he said, eyes still on the screen. Might, as if she were weather. I watched the reflection of his face in the dark glass, how relaxed he looked saying it, how tense he became when I didn't respond right away. At the party, he introduced me with less enthusiasm than the room deserved. "This is her," he said, gesturing vaguely, already turning away. When someone asked how long we'd been together, he answered before I could, shaving months off the truth. A small thing, sharp enough to draw blood if you noticed. Then there were the glances, quick, checking the door, followed by a half smile he didn't share with me. His laugh changed pitch when he was nervous. I heard it every time her name came up. No one insulted me outright. That would have been easier. Instead, I was edited out in real time, paused, minimized, treated like I'd already agreed to disappear. And the cruelest part was how certain he seemed that I would let it happen quietly. It happened in a moment so small, no one else noticed. He leaned toward the door when it opened, hope flashing across his face before he caught himself. Not for me. Never for me. That reflex, unguarded, honest, landed heavier than any argument we'd never had. I felt the decision arrive before the words. Not anger, not sadness, certainty, the kind that settles your breathing and straightens your spine. I finally understood that I wasn't being tested tonight. I was being replaced in stages, gently enough that I'd be blamed for noticing. I watched him greet her with a familiarity he hadn't earned recently. A touch too close, a laugh too quick. Then he glanced at me just once, checking if I'd behave. That look was the last thing I needed. I realized I didn't want an explanation. I didn't want to win him back or make a point. I wanted my dignity intact. I wanted the ending to be quiet enough that it would echo. So I moved before doubt could interfere. I stepped toward the door, beat him to it, felt the room tilt slightly as attention shifted. My voice didn't shake. My smile didn't falter. In that instant, I wasn't reacting anymore. I was choosing. And choice, I learned, is the sharpest kind of power when no one sees it coming. I didn't plan revenge the way movies teach you to. There were no speeches rehearsed in the mirror, no messages drafted and deleted. My preparation was quieter, built from years of watching how people underestimate composure. I understood rooms, timing, and the weight of absence. That was my skill set. I took stock quickly. I knew whose apartment it was. I knew which friends mattered to him and which were just noise. I knew how much effort he'd put into curating this night, how badly he wanted it to feel effortless, admired, intact. And I knew that any confrontation would only give him a role he'd already practiced. Reasonable guy with a difficult girlfriend. So my strategy was subtraction. No accusations. No ultimatums. I checked my coat location, my phone battery, my keys. I made sure I didn't leave anything behind that would require a return. Independence is cleaner when it's immediate. I reminded myself of one rule I'd learned long before him. If you stay calm, people reveal themselves faster. If you leave calmly, they panic. This wasn't about embarrassing him. It was about letting the truth stand alone, unprotected by my patience. I would say one sentence. I would keep my voice steady. I would exit before the story could be rewritten. Sometimes the most strategic move isn't escalation. It's timing your silence so perfectly that it becomes unforgettable. I opened the door before he could reach it. Cool air brushed my face, carrying the faint smell of rain and streetlights. She stood there, confident and curious, already certain of her place in the room. I didn't flinch. I smiled the way people do when they're finally free of pretending. "Hey," I said gently, stepping aside. "He's all yours, girl. I was just leaving." The words landed softly, but the effect was immediate. The music behind me faltered. Someone missed a beat on the playlist. Laughter died mid-breath. I felt him stiffen at my back, felt the sudden scramble of a plan he hadn't prepared for. He said my name once. Too late, too quiet. I didn't wait for a response. I picked up my coat, nodded at a couple of faces that suddenly couldn't meet my eyes, and walked out like this had always been the plan. Behind me, voices overlapped, questions collided, and the mood cracked open. Outside, the night was still. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, letting the silence rinse me clean. My phone buzzed once, then again. I didn't look. Later, I'd hear what happened, that no one knew where to stand, that the cake went untouched, that conversations kept circling back to me like an absence they couldn't explain away. I never raised my voice. I never demanded respect. I just removed the illusion that everything was fine, and somehow that ended the party the second I left. By morning, the silence had spread. Friends who'd laughed too easily the night before suddenly texted with careful wording, as if approaching a scene after something fragile had broken. "Are you okay? That was intense." No one asked what I'd done wrong. They already knew. He called once, left a voicemail full of pauses and explanations that started confident and unraveled halfway through. He said my name like it might rewind time. It didn't. The story had already settled without my participation. People are surprisingly honest when the person who used to protect the narrative steps away. What reached me later mattered more. Quiet apologies from people who admitted they'd noticed things before but assumed I was fine. That assumption, that calm people don't. Mine being diminished is how disrespect survives. When I left, it forced everyone to reevaluate what they'd normalized. His reputation didn't explode. It eroded. Slowly. The kind of damage no defense can fully fix. Mine didn't need rebuilding. I'd never compromised it. I'd just been standing in the wrong place. That's why this moment matters. Not because of him. Because too many people are taught that self-worth must be defended loudly to count. It doesn't. Sometimes dignity shows up as restraint. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to compete for space you should have never had to earn. If you've ever been told to be cool while being quietly pushed aside, this is your reminder. Walking away isn't weakness, it's clarity. I didn't feel victorious afterward. I felt clear. There's a difference. Victory still ties you to the fight. Clarity releases you from it. In the days that followed, I noticed how much lighter my routines felt without explaining myself to someone committed to misunderstanding me. I slept better. I laughed without checking the room. I trusted my instincts again, and they were quieter than I remembered, but steady. The future didn't arrive all at once. It unfolded normally, which felt like a gift. I spent time with people who didn't need me to shrink to feel comfortable. I relearned what it meant to be chosen without conditions, including by myself. When I thought of him, it was without anger, just context. What stayed with me wasn't the line I said at the door, but the moment before, the calm certainty that I didn't need permission to leave a story that no longer honored me. That knowledge doesn't fade. It travels with you into new rooms, new relationships, new versions of yourself. I didn't end his birthday party to prove a point. I ended my role in a dynamic that required me to disappear quietly. And here's the truth I carry forward. The coolest thing I ever did wasn't staying composed for someone else's comfort. It was walking away so cleanly that silence did all the talking for me.